What's up, kids? It's Thorson again, APECON. We're going to talk today about the last section in Chapter 4, which is shifts in market equilibrium. And I'm going to walk you through it. It's actually really quite simple, so no worries. So when we're looking at the shifts in market equilibrium, there's going to be 3 steps that it takes to determine how to get to the shift in market equilibrium. So every time you have a question about the shifts in market equilibrium, you have to ask yourself these 3 things to get the answer. Number 1, you have to decide whether it's a shift in the supply curve, the demand curve, or both. So basically, when you get this situation, let's say it's about lattes again, and it's about market equilibrium, when it says this thing happened, this event happened, you have to decide, is that a shift in supply, a shift in demand, or a shift in both? Usually, I'm going to give you a clue. If it's a shift in both, it's going to be an and statement. This happened and this happened, and you'll see a shift in both. But remember, when you're thinking of a supply shift, you have to think of ties. And when you think of a demand shift, you have to think of TOIS to remember, okay, those are the things that cause shifts. Number 2, once you've figured out if it's supply shift, a demand shift, or both, you have to decide which direction that curve or those curves will shift. Will there be an increase or a decrease? Once you've done that, step 3, use your new curve that you've drawn, find the new market equilibrium, and see what happened to price and quantity in that situation. So we're going to look at a few examples of this. We're looking now, hey, we moved away from lattes. Now we're going to look at the market for hybrid cars, okay? So here you would just draw a typical price, quantity, supply, demand graph. You get your price and you get your quantity, that is market equilibrium, all right? So we just draw that to start out with. Now you're going to get a situation where variables are going to change. So let's say that there's an increase in the price of gas. So if you think of TOIS, because this will be a shift in demand, as consumers, we are thinking, okay, price of gas, that's not the price of the hybrid cars, it's the price of a good that relates to the hybrid cars. So we realize that the gas is a complement to cars. You can't have one without the other. And so step 1, we've realized it's a demand shift because it's the O in TOIS, other goods prices. And number 2, we look at, before I do that, it's not supply because gas isn't affecting the cost. It's affecting it's not an input cost for those cars. All right. So step 2, now we decide which way it shifts. Now that we know it's the demand that's going to shift, does it shift to the right? Does it increase? Or does it go down? So use your common sense here. If people see that the price of gas is high, what will happen to the demand for a hybrid car which uses low gas? People are going to want more of those, so the demand will increase or shift to the right. Now you have step 3, draw the new market equilibrium and see what happens to the price and the quantity of hybrid cars. So you draw that new equilibrium, and as you can see, there's an increase, 1 to 2, in the quantity demanded of hybrid cars, or just the quantity period, because it's moving up on the supply curve, and the price increased. Okay, so those are the 3 steps. Now, let's assume my computer will work. Oh gosh, okay. Hang with me for a second. Okay, so like it said, you have to be careful. Supply, there is a movement along the curve. You need to be careful with that. If there's ever a movement on the curve from point A to B, like we saw, I'm going to go back. If you ever see a movement on the curve, like in this case, it was just a movement on the supply curve, okay, that is a change in quantity supplied, okay? But it's ever a shift, like we see with demand, it's a change in demand. So a change in supply is a shift on the supply curve. A change in quantity supplied is a movement along the line. So a change in supply is a shift. A change in quantity supplied is a movement on the line, like from point A to point B. There's no new curve. And that happens with demand too. A change in demand is the entire curve is shifting because something other than price is changing it, where a change in the quantity demanded moves along the demand line because we are changing how much we demand based on the price of that product. So be careful with your language there. All right, let's say it's a shift in supply. So let's say we're still looking at hybrid cars and a new technology is created to reduce the price of producing hybrid cars. So step one, we have to figure out it's a shift in supply or demand. Well, in this case, if you look at that, you could look at it as technology or input costs. That's definitely a supply shift because that's ties, that's T and I. It's not demand because production has nothing to do with our demand. It has everything to do with supply. It's not part of TOAS. This is a ties or a shift in supply type of situation. All right. So now that we know it's a supply curve, step two is which way does it move? So when we're looking at this, if you own a business, would you increase your supply knowing you could produce your products at a lower cost? And the answer is absolutely yes. So the whole curve is going to shift to the right. Remember, this has nothing to do with the price of hybrid cars. It has everything to do with a non-price determinant, in this case, technology, which shifts the line. Step three, it's a new equilibrium. Let's see what happens with the new equilibrium. Where am I? Here we go. The quantity increases because they're making more cars. And when they make more cars, the price decreases. And remember, as consumers, we are always happy when we see a lower price, so we demand more at this new price, and that's why you see the movement on the line. We as consumers see the price has gone down, so our quantity demanded is increasing. So what if there's a shift in both? What if you see a statement that says the price of gas rises and new technologies reduce production costs? So you're going to have a shift in both. So step one, we know that both curves shift. We see that. Step two, which way do they shift? Well, we know they both shift right from what we did in the previous questions. So you're going to shift both of them right. And then step three, find the new equilibrium. So remember, this is something important you need to see. You have a choice of three different equilibriums you could choose from. It's only the equilibrium where supply curve 2 meets demand curve 2. So find D2 and S2. That's the new equilibrium. So with that, we can see what happened. Well, for sure, we know. Where is it? Gosh, it's been bugging me today. For sure, we know quantity is increasing. Price, we're not really sure. When it's a double shift, this is ambiguous, meaning, because what if it shifted over here? The price could be here. Or what if it shifted here? The price could be there. It just depends. So we don't know. So I'm going to tell you this right now. If it's both are shifting in the same direction, meaning both are shifting to the right or both are shifting to the left, price will be ambiguous. We'll 100% know quantity. If it's a opposite shift, if they both shift and demand increases but supply increases or vice versa, we'll 100% know the price, but then at that point, quantity will be ambiguous. So just keep that in mind. If they shift together in the same direction, price is ambiguous. If they both shift but in opposite directions, quantity will be ambiguous, okay? If you see what I was talking about, look at the same thing happened. They both shifted to the right, but then in this case, we shifted this way to the right and then price is lower at this point. So you just don't know. We're not really sure. So what I'm going to do is I want you guys to pause this after I read through this and try this on your own, and then I'm going to go over the answers. So use the 3-step process I just told you to analyze the effects of each event on the equilibrium price and quantity of music downloads. So you're going to draw the market for music downloads. All you're doing is drawing a simple supply demand graph, just like this. You're going to start out like this. And make sure you label everything. Label the supply curve, label the demand curve, label the market equilibrium Q1 and P1. It should look just like this, okay? Where you see the supply curve is marked, the demand curve is marked, the X and Y axes are marked, and the market equilibrium is marked. So do that, look at the situation for all three of these and see what would happen. Pause it, and then start it up again. Okay. Now that you're back, we're going to move on and look at the answers. All right, so let's look at A. Let's say there's a fall in prices of CDs. Is that TOAS or TIEs? And the answer is TOAS. That is our demand because it's the O, it's the other goods prices. CDs and music downloads are complements to each other. Or, I'm sorry, substitutes for each other. A music download and a CD you can have, and they could substitute each other out. So we know it's demand because it's the O in TOAS. Step one. Now we have to decide what happens to the demand for music downloads. If we see the price of CDs fall and it's a substitute, we know we would rather buy CDs than music downloads since they're cheaper. So our demand for music downloads decreases or shifts to the left. Part three, we look at the price and quantity and what happens. They both fall. You can see that they both went from 1 to 2. That's a decrease. Price 1 to 2. That's a decrease. All right. Let's look at letter B. So we're still in the same market, but we have a brand new situation. There's a fall in the cost of royalties. So that means that suppliers don't have to pay as much to musicians to sell their music on the music downloads. So that's an input price that's in ties. That means it's going to be a shift in supply. Okay. Step two, now that an input cost of theirs has gone down, as a business owner, when your costs go down, you want to supply more. So your supply will shift to the right or increase. Step three, what happens to the new price and quantity? You can see quantity of music downloads increases from 1 to 2 and prices are dropping right here. All right, let's look at the third situation. Let's say the price in CDs fall and they fall in cost and royalties. You're going to see both of them shift. Demand shifts to the left and supply shifts to the right. Now, remember when I say when they both shift and they shift in opposite directions, that's when quantity is ambiguous. Because if it shifts so much one way, it could make an increase. If it shifts so much another, it could be a decrease, or it could just stay the same. We don't know. So that's ambiguous, but for sure prices fall when we see this. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to practice this now. I've given you a lot of practice. We go to Carnegie Hall with all of this. The more you practice this, the easier it gets. Do not forget, label everything. Okay? I will talk to you later.